So now that we've talked a little bit about the items in the menu, and I know I've only done a little bit, but remember, this is just supposed to be an overview, right? A zoomed out version of what this software is all about and what it can do. For the toolbox, I'm actually going to go to our practice sheet that we created a second ago in order that I can illustrate the tools as we go. So first of all, my second piece of advice to you is when you first start using Sketchpad, the first thing that you need to get in the habit of doing is after you have used any tool, to click back to the select button and let that be your default tool for when you're working in Sketchpad. And I'll show you why. So this button, the one that looks like an arrow, is the select and translate button. It lets you do those two things. Select items, which I don't have any items right here, so I can't demonstrate yet, or translate, which is just the fancy geometry way of saying move. Okay, so let's put some things out there. So first, we make a couple of points. Okay, now you remember what I just said. Get in the habit after you've used a tool to click the select button, right? Here's why. If you don't and you forget and you want to really select this and move it somewhere, or you want to maybe connect these two things, or you want to construct something else and you forget and you start clicking, suddenly you're going to have points everywhere, and when you double click, weird things happen and then other stuff, and suddenly you've got a sketch full of dots. Okay, whereas if you remember, then you can select a bunch of these and delete in order that your sketch looks a little bit cleaner. The other beautiful thing that this button lets you do, which you saw, is I'm holding the mouse button down and dragging to make this little rectangle in order to select more than one thing. Okay, so you can tell right now nothing is selected. See? Whereas now all three of the points are selected, and you can tell because of course they have that bright kind of highlight to it. Now if you remember, under preferences, this is where you can change the colors for what that highlight is. So if you don't like this lovely purple fuchsia thing, you can change it to some other color. Okay, and that way whenever you change it, they're a little bit darker than they were before. Okay? So these are all things that you can change. Now, with them selected, you can do all kinds of things. You could measure, for example, the coordinates. Well, as soon as you do that, because we're talking coordinates, the grid that we were talking about a second ago is going to come up. I can hide the grid if you don't like that. I can also hide the axes, and I can do that by selecting them. So remember what we said, this is the select and translate button, so I'm going to select both the axes and I'm going to go to display and hide. And you notice I left these two little points. If you forgot those, you can also hide them. And don't worry if at some point you hide a bunch of stuff and you needed it back. Under that same place, display, show all hidden. What's really nice is if you keep it all selected right now, you can hide it all back again in one fell swoop instead of having to do it individually. Now, you know, the video was mentioning about it being dynamic. So for example, right now, point A has coordinates negative, really about negative 2.5, 8.5. But look, when you click and drag, you can actually see the dynamic nature of this software, and that's really where the power comes in. I mean, anybody can draw point A on the board and put negative 0.92, 8.15, but if you erase that point and move it over here, then you've got to erase and rewrite all those coordinate values, whereas Sketchpad does it for you. Okay, so that's the select tool, the point tool. This one, as you can probably imagine, is the compass tool. It lets you make circles. Okay, and again, remember what I said, get in the habit of clicking the select button in order that you can move things, select things, as opposed to accidentally go around making a million circles everywhere. Okay, and don't forget, undo is your friend. If you get a little too crazy, you can undo. In my case, I was using the keyboard shortcut, which is Option Z. It's Control Z for you if you're on a PC. But just like before, right, we can measure things. For example, the circumference of this circle. And then when we drag on the point, those measurements are all dynamic and change. Okay, so that's the compass tool to make circles. This is the straight edge tool. I'm holding down the mouse button right now so you can see the three options for what this tool does in order: segment, ray, and line. Okay, so I'll leave it on segment and actually use it to connect the dots. Notice that when I'm doing that, I am starting on the point and not letting go of the mouse button, right, until the other point is highlighted. Okay, this button is still active, this tool, so if I click over here, I'm going to be making yet another segment. And if I click, I'm going to be making another segment. So don't forget to come back and change that. I'm going to skip down to the one that looks like an A. That's my text tool, my text and label tool, and I'm going to do that because it allows me to move the labels of my objects. So A, B, and C are labels of my points. If I click on an object, it will show what that object's label is. So this segment, before you didn't know what it was called, but now you know this is segment J. This circle is circle C1. So notice as soon as I did that, it changed the circumference to C1 is 42.4 centimeters. Okay. Sketchpad, one of the things I love about it is very true to geometric definitions. So the definition of array is it starts at an endpoint and it goes infinitely in one direction, which is exactly what the drawing does. So no matter where you put this second point, see I still have the button, my mouse button held down right now. No matter where you put that point, it will it only determines the direction of the ray. The length of the ray is infinite. And don't worry though, if you go to print, what Sketchpad does is it puts a little arrow on the end of this. It doesn't just keep printing for days and days and days, your ray. And then you can imagine what's going to happen here, right, with a line. Okay, now soon and very soon you'll see, just like now, your sketch gets pretty cluttered. Okay, so there are some things that you can do to either declutter or to just make some things look different. So for example, maybe I decide that I want all the things that are segments to be a little bit thinner or a different color or dotted, or so that's where this would come into play. Okay, so that makes things look a little bit better. Maybe I want my ray to be a dashed line. Maybe I want my line to be a dotted line, and I want it to be a different color. Okay, and all of these things are pretty intuitive. You'll notice that the trick, if you want to call it that, on all of them is you have to have selected what you want Sketchpad to do something with. Okay, so for example, if I want to measure this angle ACB, I have to have some way of telling Sketchpad that it's this angle that I'm interested in measuring, because when I go to measure right now, there's no option to measure the angle. It doesn't know what I want. So before I get to this other tool, which I know I've skipped, hang on a minute. I'm going to go to a new tool. It's new to me anyway because this is version 5. And I've already told you how long I've been working with this software. It's called the marker tool, and I love this tool because it's a quick way of selecting and creating an angle, especially if you want to measure it. So I'm going to go ahead and use it. It does other stuff too, but I'm going to get to that in a minute. So the way it works is this. I want to measure this angle at angle C, but of course I know it's angle ACB or also BCA. But in order to do that a quick and easy way, I'm actually going to use the marker tool, click on the vertex, and then just drag out. So I have the mouse button held down until right now. Now I've let go of it. And now I can select that angle and measure it. And just like before, when I drag, that angle measurement is dynamic. Okay. What's fantastic is if you construct something that is a right angle, so for example right here, if I select this segment and this point and I tell it to construct the perpendicular line, and then I use my marker tool, notice what happens when I let go of the mouse button. It knows that it's a right angle. And when I click to measure, of course it will confirm that, but even better, remember what the child said on the video, if you drag it around, so here I'm going to drag around point F, notice that my angle measurement remains 90 degrees. Why? Because I constructed this as 90 degrees, as opposed to this one. I can make it 90 degrees if my eye-mouse coordination is good, but it won't change to this symbol because Sketchpad knows that this was a fake 90-degree angle, meaning I just did that by hand, and anybody that comes and drags is going to change it. Whereas this one, anybody who comes and drags, it's going to remain 90 degrees. Okay, so I know you're wondering about this one that I skipped. Let me scroll to a little bit of a blank area to practice, and let me highlight this and hide it just because it's in the way. Hide. And let me talk about the polygon tool. Okay, so this is fantastic. So what it lets you do is make a polygon by just clicking however many points you want. So here's 1, here's 2, nothing happens of course until you go to 3 because that's the smallest size polygon. If I want to stop right here at a triangle, I double click. If I want to keep going, same process. Okay, notice I still have that tool highlighted. Notice that you could also do this by selecting a bunch of points and constructing the segments, and also I could have those same points selected, and instead of making the segments, you might have noticed I could have made the interior. So I can do this on my own, but this tool just makes it so much easier. Okay, same end result.